Welcome to Hidden Hearts Podcast, where we peel back the layers of family secrets, unspoken traumas, and the emotional inheritance we carry. I'm your host, Anna Blake. Today, we are walking into the attic of memory. My guest is Elena Vance. 2 years ago, Elena lost her mother, Margaret, a woman known for her stoicism, her strength, and her silence. While clearing out her childhood home, Elena found a wooden box tucked behind the insulation of the attic eaves. Inside was a diary, and inside that diary was a woman Elena had never met. This is a story about the weight of silence and the cost of survival. Just a quick moment before we begin. If this story speaks to you, please subscribe and give this episode a like. And I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Drop your state or city in the comments. I read every single one. All right, let's go on this journey together. Elena, thank you for being here. I know this isn't an easy story to tell.
Thank you, Anna. It's strange to say it out loud. For a long time, it felt like I was betraying her just by knowing it. But I think keeping it a secret was what hurt us both in the end.
Let's start before the discovery. Paint a picture for us. Who was Margaret Vance to the outside world? Who was she to you as a child?
Margaret Vance was a fortress. That's the only word for her. She was the kind of woman who never had a hair out of place. She wore these high-collared blouses ironed perfectly. She was a librarian, and she treated our home like a library. Quiet, ordered, respectful. To the community, she was a pillar. She volunteered, she baked for the church sales, but there was no warmth. I don't mean she was cruel, she wasn't. She took care of me impeccably. I was fed, clothed, educated, but she was like a marble statue. If I skinned my knee, she would clean it and bandage it with surgical precision, but she wouldn't kiss it better. I grew up thinking that emotions were messy, inefficient things. I remember once, when I was 7, I came home crying because a girl at school had pushed me. My mother looked at me, not with anger, but with this terrifying blankness. She said, "Elena, tears fix nothing. Dry your face. The world does not stop for your sadness."
That's a heavy lesson for a 7-year-old. Did you ever see her break that character? Did you ever see her cry?
Never, not once. My father died when I was 12. Heart attack, very sudden. At the funeral, people were wailing. My aunts were hysterical. My mother stood there in her black coat, hands clasped, dry-eyed. People whispered that she was in shock or that she was strong. But looking back, I think she was just practiced. She had this ability to compartmentalize that was almost inhuman. I spent my whole life trying to be like her, trying to suffocate my own feelings because I thought that's what strength looked like. I thought her silence was peace. I didn't know it was a dam holding back a flood.
So fast forward to 2 years ago. Margaret passes away. You're left with the house. Take us to that day in the attic.
It was about 3 weeks after the funeral. I was the executor and I was getting the house ready to sell. I was dreading the attic. You know how attics are, they're where time goes to stop. It was hot, dusty. I was moving these heavy boxes of Christmas decorations, sweating, just wanting to get it over with. There was a loose floorboard in the far corner near the chimney breast. I only noticed it because I dropped a roll of packing tape and it rolled right into the gap. When I knelt down to retrieve the tape, I saw something glinting. I pulled the board up. It wasn't just a diary. It was a cigar box, old, peeling velvet. And inside was this notebook. It wasn't a fancy journal, it was a simple composition notebook, the kind you use in school, but the cover was worn soft, almost like fabric.
Did you know what it was immediately?
No. I thought maybe it was recipes, or maybe household accounts. My mother was meticulous about finances. I sat down on a stack of old magazines right there in the dust, and I opened it. The first thing that hit me was the handwriting. It wasn't the sharp, angular script I knew, the handwriting on my report cards or the grocery lists. This handwriting was frantic, loops, ink blots, slant that changed direction. It looked like it was written by someone whose hand was shaking. The date on the first entry was November 14th, 1978, 3 years before I was born.
What did that first entry say?
It said, "I have learned to smile today. I practiced in the mirror for an hour. If I show my teeth, they think I am happy. If I don't speak, they think I am content. I am building a cage of bone and skin to keep the scream inside. If I let it out, it will shatter the windows."
That is visceral. A cage of bone and skin. That doesn't sound like the librarian who ironed her blouses.
I felt like I was intruding on a stranger. I almost closed it. My heart was hammering. But I couldn't stop. I turned the page. The diary wasn't linear. It jumped around. It seemed she only wrote when she couldn't hold it in anymore. There were gaps of months, sometimes years, but the early entries from before I was born, they were focused on a place I'd never heard her mention, a town called Sovata.
What? Sovata?
It's in Romania. My mother was American, or so I thought. She had no accent. Her paperwork said she was born in Ohio. But in the diary, she wrote about the gray mountains and the smell of sulfur and pine. She wrote about a man named Julian.
Who was Julian?
At first I thought maybe an old boyfriend, but the way she wrote about him, it was desperate. There was an entry from 1979. She wrote, I saw a man with his walk today at the grocery store, the slope of the shoulders. For a second the world stopped. I almost ran to him. But it wasn't him. It is never him. He is under the earth or he is behind the wire. I don't know which is worse. Not knowing is a kind of death that happens every morning. I sat there in the attic realizing my mother, the woman who didn't cry at my father's funeral, had been grieving a man I never knew existed for my entire life. But that wasn't the biggest secret.
There was something else?
Yes. About 10 pages in, I found a photograph tucked between the leaves. It was black and white, small, square borders. It showed a young woman, my mother, but so young, maybe 20. Her hair was loose, wild. She was laughing, actually laughing, with her head thrown back. And she was holding a baby boy. And on the back of the photo, in that frantic handwriting, it said, Luca, 6 months old, my heart outside my body.
Elena, you're an only child.
Exactly, I am an only child. I was born in 1981 in Seattle. This photo was dated 1976. My entire world tilted. Physically, I felt dizzy. I stared at this baby's face, searching for a resemblance. He had her eyes. I read the next entry. It was the hardest thing I've ever read. It detailed the escape. My mother wasn't born in Ohio. She had forged papers. She had escaped the communist regime in Romania in the late 70s. But the escape didn't go as planned. She wrote, the river was so cold. Julian said we had to go one at a time. The smuggler said there was no room for the child. He said a crying baby would get us all shot. Julian screamed at him. But the soldiers were coming. We could hear the trucks.
Oh my God.
She wrote that Julian made a choice. He handed the baby, he handed Luca to his sister who was staying behind. He told my mother, go. I will come with the boy next week. Go now. She got on the boat, she crossed the border, she made it to a refugee camp, then eventually to America. Julian and Luca never came.
She left her child behind?
Yolstered. She thought she was waiting for them. She waited in a camp in Austria for 6 months, every day checking the lists of names. Every day, nothing. Eventually she got word through a network of refugees. Julian had been arrested the night she left, and the sister had disappeared into the system. My mother came to America alone. She bought a new identity. She married my father, a kind, boring man who asked no questions, and she locked that part of herself away. There was an entry from the day I was born. She wrote, a girl. She is healthy. She screams and her lungs are strong. I held her and I felt nothing but terror. How can I love her? Every time I look at her, I see the ghost of the one I left. If I love her, I am betraying him. If I love her, the universe will take her too. I must be stone. Stone cannot break.
That explains everything. The distance, the cage of bone and skin. She wasn't cold because she didn't feel. She was cold because she was terrified.
She was protecting me. In her twisted, traumatized logic, she believed that her love was a curse. She thought that if she got too close to me, if she showed too much joy, something terrible would happen. She was trying to make herself unbreakable. And reading that, I suddenly remembered all these small moments. Like when I was a teenager, I wanted to go on a school trip to Europe. She absolutely forbade it. She had a panic attack, though she didn't call it that. She just locked herself in her room. I thought she was controlling. Now I know she was terrified I would go back to the place that destroyed her.
How did you process this? Sitting in that attic, you're holding the proof that your mother lied about her origin, her name, and that you have a brother.
I didn't leave the attic for hours. The sun went down. I was reading by the flashlight on my phone. I went through phases. First, shock. Then, immense sorrow for her. Imagine carrying that? Imagine waking up every day, making breakfast, going to the library, discussing the weather while half your soul is missing. But then, I felt anger. I did. I felt angry that she didn't trust me. I was 30 years old when she died. Why couldn't she tell me? We could have looked for him. We could have shared the burden. I felt robbed of my mother and robbed of my brother.
Did the diary say anything about what happened to Luca, or did she stop looking?
The entries became sparse after I was born. It was mostly just dates. Every year on February 12th, Luca's birthday, she would write a single line. He is 5 today. I hope he is warm. He is 10 today. Does he know my name? He is 20. Please let him be alive. The last entry was written 2 weeks before she died. She was in the hospital, but she must have had the notebook with her. The handwriting was barely legible. It said, I am tired of the cage. I am coming to find you, Julian. Forgive me, Luca. Elena, forgive me for the cold. It was the only way I could keep you safe from the fire.
Elena, forgive me for the cold. She spoke to you, in the end.
She did. That line broke me. I sat there in the dark attic and I finally cried the tears she never let herself cry. I wailed. I mourned the mother I had and the mother I could have had if the world hadn't been so cruel to her.
So you have this diary, you have a name, Luca, You have a town, Sovata. What did you do?
I couldn't just close the box. I couldn't go back to my life knowing I had a brother out there. I hired a private investigator who specialized in Eastern European displaced persons. It wasn't easy. The records from that era in Romania are a mess. Julian was a common name. We didn't have a last name for him, only my mother's maiden name, which turned out to be false too. But we had the photo, and we had the date of the arrest. It took 6 months. I was obsessively checking my email just like she must have checked those lists in the refugee camp. One day the PI called me. He said, "I think I found a match." There was a man named Luca Popescu. He was living in Cluj, a city about 2 hours from Sovata. The birth date matched. The father's name on his records was Julian. The PI sent me a current photo. Now I opened the file and I was looking at my mother's eyes. He is in his mid-40s now. He looked tired, weather-beaten, but it was him. I debated it for a week. What if he didn't know? What if he hated her for leaving? What if I was just bringing him pain? But I kept hearing her voice in the diary. Does he know my name? I wrote him a letter. I had it translated into Romanian. I sent copies of the photo from the diary. I explained everything. I told him she loved him until her last breath. I told him about the cage she built to survive.
How long did you wait for a reply?
3 weeks. They were the longest 3 weeks of my life. Then, an email appeared. It was from a younger woman, his daughter, my niece. She spoke English. She said, "My father cannot stop crying. He thought his mother died in the river. He was told she drowned. He has kept a candle for her every year."
He thought she was dead.
Yes, the regime lied to the family to punish them. They told Julian and his sister that Margaret had drowned crossing the border. Julian spent years in prison believing he had sent the love of his life to her death. Julian passed away 10 years ago. But Luca survived. He was raised by his aunt. He grew up hearing stories about his beautiful mother who died for freedom. We arranged a video call. Seeing him, it was like looking in a distorted mirror. We have the same nose, the same way of tilting our heads when we listen. He doesn't speak much English, so his daughter translated. The first thing he said to me was, "Did she suffer?" I told him she suffered every day, but she survived. And she loved you. I showed him the diary. I read him the entries about his birthday. He just put his head in his hands and wept.
Have you met in person?
Yes. Last summer, I flew to Romania. I went to Sovata. Luca took me to the house where they lived before the escape. It's a ruin now, but the mountains are still there. The smell of pine and sulfur is still there. We went to the river where she crossed. We stood on the bank. It was peaceful. Birds were singing. It was hard to imagine the terror she felt that night. I brought the diary with me. I gave it to him. It belongs to him more than it belongs to me. It's the history he was stolen from.
How has this changed your relationship with your mother's memory? You said earlier you felt robbed. Do you still feel that way?
No, I don't feel robbed anymore. I feel humbled. I used to judge her for her hardness. I used to think she was defective. Now I see her as a warrior. She survived the unimaginable. She severed her own heart to ensure I had a life where I didn't have to make those kinds of choices. I understand now that her silence was a form of love. It was a misguided love, maybe. It damaged us, yes, but it was ferocious. She held that pain alone so I wouldn't have to carry it. When I came back from Romania, I visited her grave. I sat on the grass and I talked to her. I told her I found him. I told her he is alive. I told her he knows she didn't abandon him. And for the first time since she died, I felt a lightness. I felt like the cage had finally opened.
Elena, your story is a testament to the fact that parents are people first. Flawed, traumatized, secretive people. We are the sequels to stories we haven't read. If there is someone listening right now who feels a distance from a parent, who feels like there is a wall they can't breach, what would you say to them?
I would say, be curious. If there is silence, ask what lives inside it. Don't assume the distance is about you. It's almost never about you. It's about what happened to them before you existed. And if you find a key, a diary, a letter, a photograph, don't be afraid to turn it. The truth might hurt. It might shatter everything you thought you knew, but it is the only way to heal. Secrets fester in the dark. They only lose their power when you bring them into the light.
Secrets lose their power in the light. That is beautiful. Elena, thank you. Thank you for bringing your mother's voice into the room. Thank you for honoring Luca. And thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you, Anna.
That was Elena Vance Wolhem. We often look at our parents and see them as fixed points in our universe, unchanging, simple, and defined only by their relationship to us. But as Elena's story reminds us, we are often walking through museums of people we never really visited. Margaret Vance was a librarian who silenced her own story. But how many of us are doing the same? How many wars are being fought in the quiet rooms of our own hearts? Tonight, I want you to remember that the people you love are not just characters in your story. They are the protagonists of their own tragedies and their own victories. Don't wait for a diary to tell you who they are. If Elena's story resonated with you, or if you are holding a key to a family secret of your own, we want to hear from you. Please subscribe to Hidden Hearts Podcast. And if you have a moment, leave us a review. It helps other people find these stories. I'm Anna Blake. Thank you for listening to The Whispers Behind the Walls. Until next time.